Good evening. My name is Milena Costa, and I'm a 30-year-old resident of Cafelandia, a small municipality in the interior of Paraná. My husband worked for a long time for a doctor who owned several small farms in different neighboring municipalities. Here, and we lived going back and forth every week as he handled the maintenance of all those properties and also managed some weekend rentals. My husband was a kind of jack of all trades but earned quite well for it, so we had nothing to complain about. The only downside was the constant travel we had to do. One of these small farms always had a serious problem with termites. My husband had already tried various things, but nothing ended the infestation. So we decided to stay a few days on this farm to solve it once and for all. This one didn't have a permanent caretaker because the man who lived there had quit a few weeks earlier, claiming he couldn't sleep properly at night. He said he would hear children playing outside the house and inside too, even though the place was far from other houses and surrounded by walls, and the noises always happened in the early morning. Many times he said he had seen shadows, heard children laughing and even things falling on the floor, so he decided to leave before he went crazy. And it was on this farm that my husband and I were going to spend a few days. We had never believed in these supernatural things, including those horror movies that many people are afraid of. We would watch them laughing at how unbelievable they were. But in that week of 2016, everything changed. My husband had put poison in the lower part of the house because that's where the termites were coming from, while I was preparing dinner in the house where the caretakers used to stay. I was making meat, and I always left some chopped seasonings on the table to use little by little. Near these seasonings, I left a medium-sized knife that I'd used for cutting. Then I went to the cupboard to get a larger spoon, and when I returned to the stove, I looked and the knife was no longer on the table. It was on the windowsill. At first, I found it strange because I was sure I hadn't gone to the window until then. But even so, I didn't pay much attention. So after preparing the food, I went to call my husband and left the knife there on the windowsill. When I came back to serve dinner, I looked towards the window and the knife was no longer there. It was back on the table. I stared at it without understanding, and my husband asked, "What's wrong? You look strange." Then I told him what had happened, but he just laughed jokingly and said I was like the little boy from the movie The Sixth Sense. After eating, we were still having coffee at the table when we heard the bedroom door slam and footsteps like someone running in the hallway. My husband got up quickly and ran towards the footsteps, went to the front door, which was locked, and saw nothing. That's when we started to feel a little uneasy. We grabbed some fishing rods from an old storage shed and went to a small lake on the property. That seemed like the best way to not give too much importance to the events that had happened so far. But even at the lake, strange things started happening again. I was in the water up to my knees, and my husband was next to me, and that's when I felt something like many completely cold hands grabbing my legs. I started screaming desperately, and my husband took my hand and pulled me out of the water. When I told him what I had felt, he immediately went back to the house, and we started packing our things to leave. If things were like that during the day, imagine what it would be like at night. We called Dr. Don Chara, and he asked us to wait until he arrived. He wanted to see these things with his own eyes. So we stayed on the porch of the house watching the sunset with a feeling that something macabre was about to happen. When night fell, we had left our things in the car and were waiting for the doctor to arrive so we could leave. We sat in the living room, and I had made some coffee to pass the time. That's when the terror began. Everything was silent when suddenly a very loud scream came from the direction of the lake. My husband immediately stood up saying, "My God, what could that be?" But we didn't even have time to go to the window to look. We already saw inside the house a sinister shadow coming from the hallway. We ran out of the house and towards the car to get away from that place. When the headlights illuminated the front of the house, We saw several children standing both outside and inside the house. To this day, I'm afraid to close my eyes and then open them to see that vision again. We left there and stayed on a dirt road that leads to the farm. Even though we were very scared, we had to wait for the doctor to arrive to give him the keys. About 40 minutes later, he arrived and we signaled for him to stop. He and his family were in the car and we called him aside to tell him what we had just seen. He asked for the keys and said he would spend the night there, and if anything happened, he would take some action. We told him not to go, but he went anyway. We returned home that night, and in the morning the doctor called us. I expected him to say absurd things, but he was happy and had just returned from the lake where he had fished with his sons. I asked him if he had seen anything, but he said the house was quiet like any other place. He hadn't seen or heard anything. I can't explain what happened, but for sure that night there was something evil in that house. Why the doctor didn't see anything, I can't explain. Days later, we went to the house of the former caretaker there, and he stated emphatically that there was something evil there. He said that one night he woke up with something sitting next to him on the bed that then turned into black smoke and disappeared. Other times, he saw children running in the hallways and a sinister shadow walking around the house. Why only we saw these things and other people didn't, I have no idea. But that place hides something macabre. Whenever we need to go there, we go very early in the morning, and by afternoon we're already leaving. Staying there until it gets dark. Never again. Good night. Good evening. My name is Renato Carneiro, and I live in a small municipality in the interior of Rio Grande do Sul. I don't quite know where to begin telling the story I lived, because I have no idea what the creature was that haunted my animals. From time to time, I have some dairy cows, about 12, and some other animals whose sale supplements my monthly income. I also have some vegetable gardens that my wife and daughter help me take care of. Here, where I live, is a bit far from some things, especially the school. So every day I go to drop off and pick up my daughter, and my wife stays alone for a while until I get back with her. The first appearance of this thing was in the late afternoon 3 years ago. I had gone out to pick up my daughter, and my wife was picking some vegetables in the garden. When I arrived, I got off the motorcycle, and the windows and doors were all locked. I found it strange because usually everything is open when I arrive, and it hadn't been raining for everything to be closed. I knocked on the door and called my wife. Then she came and opened it very scared, asking us to come in because she had seen something near the animals. I went in and asked her what she had seen that made her tremble like that. Then she said, "After you left, I saw all the animals going to the corner of the fence, so I watched it." I got up and slowly went to the fence, and that's when I saw a creature that I can't quite explain what it was. It was behind some trees on the other side of the property, and the animals were terrified, even though they were a little far from what was looking at them. I ran and locked the whole house until you guys arrived. "What kind of creature was that you saw?" I asked. "It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen. It was pale, bald, and its face looked deformed. It must be something demonic because all the animals that were loose gathered together in the corner of the fence while that thing was looking at them. That was the first visit that the pale creature paid us. The second appearance was many months after the first, and this time I saw it. It had been raining for days, and it was quite cold. I had built a shelter for the animals and was at home with my family on that rainy night. That's when I started hearing the sound of the animals running in the fence, and I opened the window, a little to look. They were all going together from one side to the other, none of them separated from the group. Where one went, they all went too. Right then, I put on my boots to see what was happening because they only act like that when they are afraid of something. It was a very dark night, and you could hardly see anything. Only occasionally a lightning bolt illuminated everything for less than a second. That's when I saw a pale creature near the fence, jumping from one side to the other, scaring the animals. It was exactly as my wife had described, pale, hairless, and unlike anything anyone has ever seen. I went back into the house and got a strong flashlight I had, and a short-handled axe too. I went back to the fence and headed towards the strange creature, but that thing took 2 jumps so far that even if I had been on my motorcycle, I wouldn't have been able to keep up. The moment the creature disappeared into the trees, the animals returned to the shelter, and I went back home. After that sighting, I didn't see the strange creature for several more months. But now, the creature didn't come to haunt the animals, but my family. My house has a wooden ceiling and a kind of attic with a small entrance in the back. You can only go up there by ladder, and the entrance is outside. There's no entrance to it from inside the house. I used to store some old things there, but for some years now I haven't left anything there. I rarely went up, only occasionally when some bird tried to make a nest there. Then I had to go up to chase it away. But that night, I didn't go up there to chase away a bird. I was already asleep with my family when I woke up to rapid footsteps on the ceiling. I got up and stood looking up with my wife. What could that be? "There's something walking up there," she said. Whatever was up there stopped walking and started what sounded like scratching the wood. So I ran and grabbed my flashlight and my axe and went outside to see what it was. My wife came with me, and I said, "Help me put these wood shaving sacks here on the side. If it's some animal and I need to jump, I'll jump on the sacks." I placed one of the sacks near the ladder and went up. I looked through the opening. It was very dark, and you could hardly see anything. So I took the flashlight, and before turning it on, I took one last look at where the sacks were in case I needed to jump. Then I pointed the flashlight and turned it on. At that moment, I saw a creature so sinister that I don't even know how I didn't turn around and fall off the ladder. It was the creature I had seen on the rainy night months before. It had climbed up, I don't know how, and was up there. I turned and jumped onto the sacks and immediately got up to lock myself inside the house. When I locked myself in, I only heard the sound of something falling and running. Without a doubt, it was the creature that had been nearby. We stayed locked in that night, and in the morning, I closed the attic entrance. Since then, we live in fear that this creature will return. It's been a few years since we last saw the creature, and we also haven't seen the animals gathering fearfully in the fence. But I know that thing must still be out there, and I have no doubt that one day it will return. Good night.